The sun was setting over New Harbor when Captain Daniel received the message. His small office in the Colonial Administration Building looked out over the green valleys and blue water that made this distant planet feel like home. For 5 years, had worked to build a place where humans could live in peace, away from the politics and violence of the Central Worlds. The message came through emergency channels. A ship had arrived at the outer station requesting immediate communication with colonial leadership. Knew what this meant. The collective did not send peaceful ships. They sent demands. Within the hour, sat in the council chamber with the other senior leaders of New Harbor. Commissioner Lisa arrived first, then the others filed in. They were nervous. No one spoke above a whisper. The walls seemed to close in as they waited for the visual communication to begin. The image flickered to life on the main screen, appeared before them. The alien was tall and angular with skin that looked like polished silver. His eyes were cold and empty, the eyes of something that had seen too many worlds bend to its will. Behind him stood soldiers in armor that gleamed with deadly technology. Did not greet them. He did not waste time with pleasantries. His voice came through the speakers, speaking in perfect human language, each word like a knife. I am a representative of the collective. Your species has been recorded in our files. You are human. You are primitive. You are dangerous. He paused, letting the words sink in. The collective has decided that your expansion must stop. Your military forces will be dismantled. Your weapons will be surrendered. You will become part of the collective, following our laws and our way. You have 30 days to comply. After 30 days, we will enforce compliance with military force. This is not a negotiation. This is not a discussion. This is the only warning you will receive. The screen went black. The chamber erupted into chaos. Some people shouted that they should surrender immediately. Others demanded that they resist. Commissioner tried to bring order, but her voice was lost in the noise. Sat silent, staring at the empty screen. Commander Anna Reeves stood and slammed her hand on the table. She was tall and strong, with the bearing of someone who had trained soldiers for decades. Her voice cut through the noise like a weapon. "We will not surrender," she said. "Not today, not ever." "That's easy to say," one council member shot back. "But the collective destroys any species that defies them. We have seen the reports. They are unstoppable." Finally spoke. His voice was quiet but steady. "We are not the first humans to face impossible odds. Throughout our history, we have chosen to fight for our freedom. We have lost battles and wars, but we have never stopped fighting for what matters." "This is different," another council member said. "This is not a regional conflict. This is the entire collective." "Is it?" asked. "The collective rules through fear, through the belief that they cannot be beaten. What happens if we show them that we will not break? What happens if we show them that humans will fight for freedom even when it seems hopeless?" Anna Reeves moved to stand beside. "I have trained soldiers for 20 years. I have seen humans face death and choose duty instead. I have seen humans run into fire to save their friends. We can do this. We can make them pay such a high price for taking our colony that the collective will think twice before attacking the next world." The debate continued for hours. Some people wanted to negotiate, others wanted to flee. But slowly Reeves began to win people over, not because humans could actually defeat the collective. Everyone in that room knew the truth, but because some things were worth dying for. By midnight, the vote was taken. The decision was made. New Harbor would not surrender. As the council members left the chamber, stood alone in the darkness. He looked out the window at the lights of the colony below. Families were sleeping. Children were dreaming of tomorrow. They had no idea that tomorrow might never come. Lisa came and stood beside him. She was younger then, but she had the hardness of someone who had made difficult decisions before. "Do you think we can win?" she asked. "No," said honestly. "But I think we can make them understand that conquest comes with a price. I think we can show them that humans do not break easily, and maybe, just maybe, that will inspire others to resist as well." Nodded, "Then we had better get to work." Turned from the window. He had a colony to prepare for war. He had civilians to evacuate. He had soldiers to organize. He had a military resistance to build from nothing but determination and hope. The collective had made a mistake when they sent their ultimatum. They had assumed that humans would crumble under pressure. They had assumed that humans valued survival more than freedom. They did not understand that humans had fought their entire history for the right to choose their own fate. They did not understand that when you corner a human and give them nothing left to lose, they become something dangerous. left the chamber and walked out into the night. New Harbor was beautiful under the stars, but soon those stars would rain down fire. The question was not whether humans could win. The question was whether they could fight hard enough to matter. As walked toward the military headquarters, he made his mental calculations. The colony had about 5,000 soldiers. The collective had millions. The odds were impossible, but had studied human history. He knew that humans had survived the impossible before. They had faced extinction and found a way to endure. He reached the military building and found Commander Reeves already there, working at a tactical station. She looked up as he entered. "We need to organize evacuation routes," said. "We need to move civilians to safe positions. We need to prepare defensive positions. And we need to reach out to every other human colony in this region. The collective cannot attack all of us at once. If we coordinate, we can make this more than one isolated battle." Reeves smiled. It was not a smile of confidence or hope. It was the smile of a soldier who had accepted that she might die, but that she would not die alone. "Let's make them regret the day they sent that ultimatum." The night stretched long ahead of them. There was much work to do. There was no time for doubt. The collective was the message came through a secure channel 3 days after the collective's ultimatum. Was in the command center working on evacuation plans when the communication officer called him over. The signal was encrypted in a way did not recognize at first. "Sir, we have someone trying to reach you," the officer said. "They say they have information about the collective. They say they want to help." His first instinct was caution. This could be a trick, but he authorized the connection anyway. The face that appeared on the screen shocked him. It was a warrior. Had studied the alien races in the galaxy's database, but he had never seen in person. They were known as fierce fighters, brutal and efficient. This name was, he was massive, with thick blue skin and scars that told stories of 100 battles. His voice was deep and hard, like rocks grinding together. "Captain, my name is, I represent the people. We have heard about your refusal to surrender to the collective. We wish to offer our support." Leaned back in his chair, suspicious. "Why would the help humans? We have no connection to your people. We have no history together." "This is exactly why we will help," said. "The collective has ruled my people for centuries. They tell us that resistance is impossible. They tell us that they are strong and we are weak. They use this fear to control us. But now a species we have never met refuses to surrender. Now humans show the galaxy that the collective can be resisted. This changes everything." Over the next few hours, more messages came through. A species called the known for advanced engineering wanted to help. The brilliant tacticians who had suffered under collective rule for generations sent their own representatives. Each species had the same message. They were tired of living under fear. They wanted to help humans fight. Called an emergency meeting with his senior commanders. Commander Reeves arrived with her military planning staff. General Victor Torres, an older soldier with gray hair and deep eyes, sat silent and listened. Warner, the colony's chief scientist, took detailed notes. "We need to understand why they are really helping," Torres said. He had fought in wars across 3 different worlds and had learned not to trust easy alliances. "Species do not send military support out of kindness. There must be another reason." One by one, the alien representatives explained their situation. The collective had ruled through propaganda and fear for so long that no one believed resistance was possible. One species had tried to rebel 200 years ago and had been completely destroyed. Since then, no one had tried again. But the warrior explained something that caught everyone's attention. "The collective has achieved everything through the belief that they cannot be defeated. If you fight them and survive, even if you ultimately lose, the mythology breaks. Other species will see that survival is possible. Other species will see that the collective can bleed. This changes the power balance across the entire galaxy." Warner leaned forward. "You are saying that if we resist successfully enough, even if we lose this particular battle, we inspire galactic revolution." "Yes," confirmed. "This is why the collective sends ultimatums instead of simply attacking. They want surrender without resistance. They want to avoid any situation where they must show their weaknesses. Your refusal breaks their control." General Torres nodded slowly. He understood military strategy, and what described was sound thinking. "So we are not just fighting for New Harbor. We are fighting for the possibility of freedom across the entire galaxy." The alien representatives confirmed this understanding. Over the next several days, military specialists from each species arrived at New Harbor. They brought experienced warriors. They brought their knowledge of advanced weapons systems. They brought tactical expertise developed over centuries of conflict. Commander Reeves worked with military leaders to coordinate strategies. What became clear very quickly was that the aliens fought in completely different ways from humans. They valued direct confrontation and were amazingly tough in combat. They approached warfare like an engineering problem, always looking for efficiency. The thought in terms of long-term strategy and patience. But the humans brought something unexpected to the alliance. When Reeves explained her defensive strategy to the other commanders, the aliens initially dismissed it as too risky. It involved spreading forces thin across multiple positions instead of creating one strong defensive line. "We will be defeated in detail," a commander objected. "Each position will be overrun separately." "No," Reeves explained. "We will evacuate defensive positions before they are completely surrounded. We will move our forces constantly. We will never give the collective a clear victory point. We will wear them down through constant resistance rather than one final battle." Warner added her own innovation. She had been working with engineers on a new weapon design. It was based on the principle of chaos and unpredictability. Traditional defense systems relied on detecting patterns and responding to them. The new weapon system would create patterns that made no sense to alien tactical computers. "It uses randomness and surprise," Warner explained. "It will not be the most powerful weapon, but it will be impossible to defend against using traditional methods. The collective uses standard tactical approaches. This weapon system breaks those approaches." General Torres studied the plans for days. He had read every historical account of successful resistance against superior forces. He knew about the Vietnamese defeating American forces through unconventional tactics. He knew about smaller armies winning through adaptation and will. He began to see how humans and their allies might actually have a chance. But the timeline was short. The collective fleet would arrive in less than 20 days. There was no time for extensive planning or preparation. Everything had to happen at once. Civilians had to be evacuated. Military positions had to be established. Weapons had to be produced. Soldiers from different species had to learn to work together. Pilot Adams was one of the first humans to work directly with alien pilots. She was young and aggressive, with the kind of fearlessness that made her perfect for dangerous flying. When pilots first saw human flight tactics, they were shocked. "You flew directly at the enemy position," a pilot said, using their translation device with confusion. "Why did you not maintain safe distance?" "Because they did not expect it," Adams replied. "Most species approach combat with established patterns. If you break the pattern, you create opportunities." They considered this. Then something in his expression changed. He began to understand. Humans did not fight like other species. Humans fought like predators without rules, willing to take insane risks, willing to sacrifice themselves for advantage. The final 2 days before the collective arrived were a blur of activity that seemed impossible to coordinate. Stood in the command center and watched as the last civilian transports lifted off from New Harbor. Families stood in the windows of those ships, looking down at the colony they were leaving behind, not knowing if they would ever return. Commissioner Lisa coordinated the evacuation with brutal efficiency. She had to make impossible choices. Which colonies would be evacuated first? Which settlements would be left with minimal protection? Each decision meant that thousands of people would have to run or hide while the collective passed through. General Torres organized the military resistance. He established defensive positions across 3 major zones. Zone 1 was the capital region where headquarters was located. Zone 2 was the industrial complex in the northern mountains. Zone 3 was scattered across farming regions and smaller settlements. The plan was not to defend these areas forever. The plan was to make the collective work for every inch. Torres explained the strategy to his assembled commanders. Humans and officers stood together in the war room. "We cannot win a direct confrontation," Torres said bluntly. "The collective has more ships, more soldiers, more weapons, so we will not fight directly. We will fight like humans have always fought when faced with a more powerful enemy. We will be mobile. We will be unpredictable. We will make them pay such a high price that they begin to doubt their own invincibility." He pointed to the tactical map. "Each defensive position will be evacuated once it becomes unsustainable. We do not hold ground to the last man. We hold ground only as long as it serves our strategic purpose. Once a position becomes a trap instead of an advantage, we pull out and hit them from somewhere else. A commander nodded in understanding. This is not standard military doctrine, he said. Most species consider withdrawal to be dishonorable. Humans consider unnecessary death to be dishonorable, Tors replied. We fight to win, not to die with honor. There is no honor in getting your people killed for no purpose. The warrior seemed troubled by this approach. My people fight to the death rather than retreat. It is our way. Your way has kept your people enslaved for centuries, Tors said without judgment, simply stating fact. The collective uses your honor against you. They expect you to fight to the last, so instead we will teach them something new. Warner worked constantly with the engineers. The new weapons were finally ready. They were not beautiful or elegant. They were crude and brutal, but they were effective. The weapon systems worked on principles that alien computer systems could not anticipate. Warner tested the first weapon system personally. She watched as the targeting system aimed at a distant mountain and fired. The blast hit exactly where predicted, but it used an approach that seemed almost random. If a collective defense computer tried to calculate where the next shot would come from, it would fail because the calculation would not follow standard ballistic patterns. It is inefficient, an engineer said, studying the data. Your weapon system uses more energy for the same destructive output compared to conventional weapons. Yes, Warner agreed, but efficiency does not matter if the enemy cannot defend against you. This weapon forces their defense systems to adapt in real time. That gives us advantage. The engineer studied the plans for a long time. Then he nodded. This is clever. This is human thinking. You sacrifice efficiency for surprise. Interesting. Sergeant Cole Hayes worked with his strike team constantly. They practiced insertion missions, sabotage techniques, and rapid extraction procedures. Hayes was a decorated soldier with tactical instincts. He knew that the real war would not be fought in large battles. It would be fought by small teams hitting targets deep inside enemy territory. Your team is small, a warrior named Vex commented when he first saw Hayes and his soldiers. How can such a small force matter? Watch, Hayes replied. He demonstrated a training exercise where his 8 soldiers used terrain and surprise to destroy a simulated target position that was defended by 50 enemy soldiers. They did not kill all the defenders. They simply achieved their objective and disappeared before the defenders could organize an effective response. This is how humans fight when we must, Hayes explained. We do not try to be stronger. We try to be smarter, faster, and willing to sacrifice ourselves for the mission. By the second to last day, all preparation was complete. The evacuation was mostly finished. Military positions were established. Weapons were distributed. Soldiers from 4 different species stood side by side, waiting for the arrival of the collective. Visited each defensive position personally. He spoke with soldiers. He looked them in the eye. He did not promise them victory because that would be a lie, but he promised them something else. The collective thinks we are primitive, told the assembled soldiers at Zone 1. They think we will break. They think we will surrender when the first attacks come. They are wrong. We will fight. We will make them pay for every meter of ground they take. We will show the galaxy that humans do not surrender when it matters most. Win or lose, we will be remembered as the species that refused to bend. That is not a small thing. That is everything. The soldiers understood. Some of them would die in the coming battles. Some of them would see the collective conquer New Harbor. But they would do it fighting. They would not surrender. They would not break. As the sun set on the second to last day, stood with Commander Reeves, General Tors, Warner, Adams, and Sergeant Hayes. They looked out toward the horizon where the collective fleet would soon appear. "Are you afraid?" Warner asked. "Yes," said honestly. "I am afraid that people I care about will die. I am afraid that our colony will be destroyed. I am afraid that we might fail. But I am more afraid of what happens if we do not try. I am more afraid of what happens to every species in this galaxy if the collective is never challenged." The others nodded. They all felt it. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, the collective would learn that the collective fleet appeared at first light like a swarm of locusts blocking out the sun. Hundreds of ships moved into orbit above New Harbor in perfect formation. The communication systems crackled with collective commands and demands. Admiral Orr's voice came through every speaker on the planet. "This is the collective navy. You have had your 30 days. We are now implementing mandatory incorporation. All resistance will be eliminated. You have 1 hour to surrender all military forces. Failure to comply will result in total planetary destruction. Commander Reeves had already implemented Stage 1 of the defense. The first wave of strikes was already before the collective finished their demand. Pilot Adams flew her fighter directly into a formation of collective interceptors. Her ship was slower and less advanced, but it moved in ways that confused the enemy's targeting systems. She fired her weapons in rapid bursts, not aiming for the most efficient paths but for unexpected angles. Her first attack hit a collective fighter, damaging its engine system. The collective pilots had been trained to fight enemies that moved predictably. They had been trained by centuries of victories against species that fought according to established doctrine. They had never encountered a pilot willing to fly directly at them while firing from angles that should not work. Adams pulled her fighter into a climb that pushed the ship's systems to their absolute limit. A collective missile followed her, but her unpredictable movements caused it to lose tracking. She dove toward the surface of New Harbor and released countermeasures that created a cloud of interference. The missile exploded harmlessly against the ground. When she emerged from the cloud, she had already planned her next target. She was not trying to win an air superiority fight. She was trying to inflict damage while surviving as long as possible. On the ground, Sergeant Cole Hayes and his strike team moved into position. Their objective was a collective communication relay stationed in the northern hills. The relay was guarded by 50 collective soldiers in heavy armor, positioned in a defensive grid that was mathematically designed to provide perfect coverage of the area. Hayes did not attack directly. His team moved through terrain that the collective tactical computers had marked as too difficult for rapid approach. They found a path that should not exist according to collective calculations. By the time the collective recognized the threat, Hayes was already in position. The attack came from an angle that the collective defensive grid did not anticipate. 3 of Hayes's soldiers provided covering fire, while the other 4 moved toward the relay installation. The collective soldiers turned to face the threat, but their armor made them slow to react. Hayes's team moved with the kind of flexibility that came from years of working together. The relay went silent. Hayes and his team were already moving to their extraction point before the collective could organize an effective response. They left behind 5 wounded soldiers and the knowledge that no position was truly secure. General Torres watched the battle unfold from the command center. He saw the collective navy moving predictably, taking up positions that they considered optimal for total coverage of the planet. He saw their error immediately. The collective had arranged their fleet in a formation that was mathematically perfect for defending against conventional attacks. But humans and their allies were not launching conventional attacks. They were launching attacks from directions that the collective had not anticipated. A capital ship moved into a position that should have been perfectly exposed, but was actually ideal for using the planet's magnetic fields to shield its weapons systems. Before the collective could respond, the ship fired, and a collective destroyer took severe damage. Fighters used their superior engineering knowledge to identify and exploit weaknesses in collective weapon systems. They moved their ships to positions where the enemy could not lock targeting on them, then fired from locations where collective defensive systems were vulnerable. They, using their centuries of tactical knowledge, coordinated the entire Allied response. While the collective reacted to threats, they identified the gaps in their response and created new threats in those gaps. It was like watching a predator circle prey, testing its defenses, looking for weakness. By the end of the first day, the collective had suffered significant damage. 3 capital ships had been severely damaged. A dozen smaller vessels had been destroyed. The collective had expected an easy victory. Instead, they had experienced something they had not felt in centuries. They had experienced failure. Admiral Orr convened an emergency meeting with his command staff. For the first time, he could see doubt in the eyes of his officers. "The collective is supposed to be invincible," one commander said, "but they are hurting us. The humans fight in ways we did not anticipate." "These are not just humans," Orr said, his voice cold with anger. "There are aliens here, other species have joined them, but it does not matter, we have more power. We will simply destroy everything until resistance becomes impossible." "Sir," another commander said carefully, "if we escalate to planetary destruction, we lose control." Other species will see that rebellion leads to annihilation. They will surrender immediately. Yes, or said, that is exactly what will happen. The age of the collective continues. These primitives will learn that defiance has a price. But something had already changed. Word of the battle spread through the galaxy faster than collective sensors could stop it. Species that had lived under collective rule for centuries heard the news. Humans had fought the collective and survived the first day. Humans had inflicted damage on the collective fleet. Humans had not surrendered. On 3 different worlds, resistance movements that had been inactive for generations suddenly became active again. On 5 other worlds, species began secretly preparing weapons that they had hidden from the collective for decades. The propaganda that had kept the collective in power was beginning to crack. Back on New Harbor, received reports of the developing situation. He saw the damage reports, the casualty numbers, the successful strikes against collective positions. It was not enough to win the war, but it was enough to show that victory was possible. The war lasted 43 days. It did not end with a single decisive battle. It ended when the mythology finally shattered beyond repair. After 10 days of fighting, New Harbor fell. The collective fleet broke through the orbital defenses. The ground forces began their invasion, made the decision to evacuate the remaining civilians and focus entirely on conducting a guerrilla campaign. The collective conquered the colony and took control of the planetary surface, but they never controlled the whole picture. Forces simply moved underground and into remote regions. They hit collective supply lines. They destroyed communication facilities. They attacked collective soldiers when they were vulnerable. Every day, the collective had to commit more resources to pacification. Every day, the war became more expensive. But something else was happening at the same time. Species across the galaxy were rising up. The revolted on there. The refused to continue producing weapons for the collective. The launched attacks on collective military installations that they had been maintaining for centuries. On 40 different worlds, resistance movements declared independence. Some had small victories. Some had small defeats, but all of them sent the same message: the collective could be challenged. Admiral or proposed a final solution to the collective leadership. He would destroy New Harbor completely. He would leave no sign that humans had ever existed. He would make an example so terrible that no other species would ever dream of resisting. But when he issued the order to his commanders, something unexpected happened. A significant portion of the collective military command refused to execute it. Admiral, a collective commander named, said, his voice carrying regret, "I cannot order the destruction of an entire world for the crime of desiring freedom. I have fought for the collective for 300 years, but today I see that I have been fighting for the wrong cause." Was not alone. 6 other senior commanders, each with decades of service, refused the order. The fracture in collective unity that had been growing for weeks suddenly became a visible break. The collective leadership tried to maintain control, but they could not. When 1/3 of your military refuses orders, you no longer have military control. When your supposed invincibility is revealed as propaganda, you no longer have control through fear. Across the galaxy, the final organized resistance began. Not organized by humans, but by the dozens of species that suddenly understood that the collective could fall. Was in a cave system beneath New Harbor when he received the news. The collective fleet was withdrawing from New Harbor orbit. The collective forces on the ground were being pulled back. The collective was not surrendering, but they were no longer trying to win. They were trying to survive. He gathered his remaining commanders. General Torres, still moving with military precision despite a blast wound on his shoulder. Commander Reeves, gray with exhaustion but still standing. Sergeant Hayes, his arm in a medical brace but his eyes still sharp. Pilot Adams, who had survived 4 months of combat flying. Dr. Warner, who had spent the entire war producing weapons and treating wounded soldiers. "We are not done," told them. "But we have already won the most important thing. We have broken the belief that the collective is invincible. We have shown the galaxy that resistance is possible. Now it is up to all the other species to finish what we started." Within days, representatives from dozens of species arrived at New Harbor, not as conquerors or rulers, but as allies. They came to discuss the creation of something new, a galactic council where no single power dominated, a system based on mutual respect instead of fear. The negotiations took 2 weeks. There were arguments and disagreements, but the core principle held firm. The age of single-power dominance was over. When the new Galactic Council was formally established, was chosen as one of the representatives. He stood in front of leaders from 40 different species and delivered a message. "We did not fight the collective because we were stronger," said. "We fought because we chose to. We fought because some things are more important than survival. We fought because freedom matters." The collective ruled through fear and propaganda. The collective believed that some species were meant to serve and others were meant to rule. This was always a lie. Every species has value. Every species can contribute. Every species deserves the right to choose their own path. The other representatives listened. Some agreed completely. Others were processing what had happened, but all of them understood that the universe had changed. 5 years later, New Harbor was rebuilt. The colony was not the same as before. It was larger, more vibrant, more diverse. Humans worked alongside and dozens of other species. Children played together in parks. Families lived side by side. Scientists collaborated on projects that would have been impossible under collective rule. Often walked through the colony at sunset and thought about what had happened. Humanity had been underestimated. Humanity had been considered primitive. But when given the choice between freedom and survival, humans had chosen freedom. And in making that choice, they had changed the entire galaxy. The collective still existed, but it was no longer dominant. It had fragmented into smaller groups that respected the autonomy of other species. The age of single-power rule was over. The age of cooperation, despite differences, had begun. One evening was walking with the collective commander who had been the first to refuse the order to destroy New Harbor, had become an advocate for the new galactic order, working to reform collective institutions from within. "When I delivered that ultimatum," said, "I did not believe you could resist. I did not think humans had the capacity for organized defiance. I was wrong." "You were not alone," replied. "Most of the galaxy thought the same thing, but humans have always survived by being adaptable, by being willing to work together, by refusing to accept that anything is truly impossible." Looked out over New Harbor as the sun set. The collective built an empire by believing in hierarchy and dominance. You and your allies built something better by believing in equality and mutual respect. Perhaps this was the inevitable outcome all along. Perhaps every system that relies on fear eventually falls to those who fight for something larger than themselves. Did not answer immediately. He simply watched the colors change in the sky as day turned to night. The future was uncertain. There would be conflicts and challenges ahead. But for the first time, the galaxy was not ruled by the fear of a single power. The age of human wrath had passed. The age of human wisdom had begun, and resistance against freedom was now what was futile. "The collective is stronger than we are," Tors told as the first day's battle ended. "But they are not as adaptive as we are. They can destroy us with overwhelming force. But every time they try to do this, they have to show that they are not invincible. The more they escalate, the more other species see that resistance works." Understood, the war was not just being fought on New Harbor. The war was being fought across the entire galaxy. And every strike against the collective, every day humans survived, every collective defeat strengthened the possibility of wider rebellion. Were not what they expected. Tomorrow, the wrath of humanity would be unleashed. As the days passed, the alliance grew stronger. What had started as separate species with different goals and methods was becoming something unified. Humans and aliens worked side by side, learning from each other. The collective had no idea what was coming. On the morning of the 28th day, the collective fleet appeared on scanners. They were coming in exactly 30 days, as promised. They were coming expecting an easy victory. They were coming to discover that they had made a terrible mistake. Coming, and humans would meet them not with surrender, but with the kind of resistance that would echo through the galaxy. The age of treating humans as primitive was over. The age of reckoning had begun.